Yes, are we live? We are live. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. Sorry for the technological issues. Welcome to our session. My name is Fiona Wilson, and I am the Deputy Chief Sustainability Officer at the University of New Hampshire. I'm also an affiliate faculty member at the Business School here at UNH. I'm joined today by two other colleagues and hopefully, other speakers here as an attendee. So Nicole, why don't you introduce yourself and I'll see if I can get Jeff to be promoted to be a speaker.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Tarico. I'm a program manager at an organization called the Intentional Endowments Network. We're a nonprofit that work primarily with college and university endowments to support them in implementing sustainable investing strategies. And I'm very excited to be here with you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karan Kishorpuria. I'm the current Director of Fund Development at NU Impact. NU Impact, one of the first undergrad-led impact investing funds in America, and excited to be here as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Karan. So, Nicole, I'm going to hand over to you, and then Jeff, our fourth speaker is in, but he's in as an attendee, not as a presenter. So I'm going to let you take over on presenting the first part of the presentation, Nicole, which you are ready to do anyway, and I'll see if I can empower Jeff to be a presenter while you are doing that. Are you seeing the slides okay, Nicole?
I don't see them right now, no.
Okay.
No.
Yep. Now you're seeing them okay?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Just tell me when you want to advance slides.
Okay. And before we dive into, I think we have a lively group of 2 or 3 folks signed in so far, but I'm going to paste in the chat here a link to a platform called, oh, something went wrong. It won't let me post it. That's great.
It's a technology day. What can you say?
A link to something called Slido. Okay. Well, I think that I dropped a link in the chat there to an app called Slido that you can click on that link, and we'll be asking a few questions throughout the presentation that we would love to hear from you, kind of polling-like questions where you can respond in sort of longer form. The first one that I have up right now is just asking what your burning questions are and what will make this session successful for you. So feel free to either use that link or just drop your thoughts on that into the chat too, and we'd love to see them, what you'd like to hear about and what would make this successful. So just throwing that out there. And to kick us off here, I'm going to share a brief introduction to the work that I do at the Intentional Endowments Network, IEN, mainly highlighting the immense power that university endowments have to, first of all, be a vehicle for advancing capital allocation towards sustainable investing, and secondly, to be a vehicle for educating, engaging, and empowering students. So Fiona, if you could go to the next slide. At IEN, we recognize the power that endowments have, and we envision a world where all endowed institutions mobilize capital to create an equitable, low-carbon, regenerative world where all people thrive. And we work to support higher education institutions in the adoption of long-term sustainable investing strategies, and we look to do so in a variety of ways. Next slide, please. So with our focus on colleges and universities, we work with 3 main capital pools. The first, the biggest focus area, is the institutional endowment. There are 2,000 higher education endowments across the US with a cumulative $600 billion in assets under management. The second capital pool is the retirement funds that faculty and staff at institutions invest in. Those funds total $890 billion in assets under management. And the third pool are student-managed investment funds on campuses, and we're aware of around 600 funds. These funds are frequently a carve-out of the endowment, sometimes a separate pool of capital, and we are aware of $750 million in assets under management by those funds. So in the context of today's presentation, we'll be focusing on the endowments and the student-managed investment funds. But if anyone would like to connect around the retirement-focused work, definitely let me know. And we work with stakeholders that influence each of these capital pools and focus on supporting the uptake of sustainable investing strategies that address social equity and climate change themes. And we do that in a variety of ways, including in-person and online learning events, sharing of news and research and reports, through communication channels and through our online resource hub, fiduciary education, peer-to-peer learning, resource and case study development, and collaborative initiatives around key topics, including working groups. Next slide, please. Good to see you, Jeff.
Yay, Jeff's in. Congratulations.
Do you want to quickly introduce yourself so you're not a nameless face?
Oh, sure. Hello, everybody. Sorry for the, or maybe big entrance. So I'm Jeff Minlin. I'm the Chief Investment Officer over at the ASU Foundation, Arizona State University. I oversee the university's endowment, which just crossed the $1 billion milestone. And I've also led many of our student sustainable investing efforts. This is my first Ashoka U, but I'm excited to be here and participate. The mission really closely aligns with ASU. My little plug is if any of you watched the Arizona State University episode of Amazon Prime's college tour, one of the students actually talks about her participation in Ashoka U and Changemaker. So excited to be here, and I'll turn it back to you, Nicole, to start to interrupt.
No worries. Happy you made it in. And I'm just going to, again, now that there are a few more people in the room, plug here, participating in this Slido poll. I'm, again, attempting to post a link in the chat. I don't know if it's going to work, but we would love to hear in the chat or through Slido what you would like to get out of this session and what your burning questions are. So anyway, when we look at endowments at IEN, each institution we work with is very unique, as are their investment processes and their approaches, as you'll see today. But we do see each endowment go through common steps in a process that we've outlined in a document called the Intentionally Designed Endowment Roadmap, which this visual here is outlining. And that's a living document on our website that we organize resources under to support institutions no matter where they are in the process. So I won't spend too much time talking about that, but we may come back to it later if helpful. Go to the next slide. So I want to quickly share where endowments are situated in the broader investment field as it relates to sustainable investing. And to quickly level set, I'm going to share a few data points, but they should each be taken with a grain of salt, because they're a good indicator of interest in the space, general growth in the space, but they are not a solid indicator of sustainable investing assets under management. And one of the main reasons for that is because I think I've probably said sustainable investing a multitude of times so far in this brief presentation. When we define that word, we use it as an umbrella term to capture environmental, social, and governance screening, impact investing, engagement, really any form of investing broadly that fits under that category. Everyone really defines it differently, and each of these surveys that I'm about to mention define it a little bit differently as to the folks that fill out the surveys. The number of reporting institutions varies survey to survey, and there is a lack of publicly available data and investment transparency across the board. So it makes it very hard to get complete data sets. But with that being said, a very frequently referenced number is by US SIF. They put out a trends report every year. And their last trends report said that a little over $17 trillion, or $1 in $3 of US assets under management, is invested using ESG strategies. Of that 17 trillion, they identified 378 billion in assets under management on behalf of educational institutions that utilize ESG. Go to the next slide. And another survey given by NACUBO, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, They survey around 800 US colleges and universities every year, and they found that 250 of those institutions were addressing ESG issues through their investment portfolio. And later, when analyzing that data, also found that a little more than half of those institutions had actually made investments in ESG. Go to the next slide, please. Apologies, my old man dog seems to be barking in the background.
He agrees with you, Nicole.
He gets jealous when he hears me talking to other people. And then the last thing on this data side that I wanted to share is just IEN's own tracking of colleges and universities. So we internally try to keep up with what schools are doing and have some up-to-date information on that point. So we know of a little under 100 schools that have ESG language in their investment policy statement. Several schools have signed on to major sustainable investing commitments like PRI. 95 have established committees on investor responsibility, which are usually a subset of the investment committee with a variety of stakeholders looking at sustainable investing, and a little under 200 have partially or fully divested from fossil fuels. So all of this to say that college and university endowments and the broader investment field are starting to move more and more quickly toward taking up more sustainable investing strategies, and the ways that they do so vary very widely. So next slide, please. One of the most powerful aspects of the IEN network is in sharing case studies and stories highlighting the different ways various institutions are approaching these conversations and implementing these strategies, and also connecting institutions with similar goals or investment strategies to advance this work. So I've included a few examples here, and am excited for Jeff and Fiona to speak to ASU and UNH's stories. There are 3 other case studies on this slide. I just wanted to highlight Becker College, a small liberal arts school. They actually have a 100% impact investment policy statement. University of California was the first public school to sign the Principles for Responsible Investing, and they also have some pretty ambitious mandates around investing in clean energy solutions. And Warren Wilson College, another small liberal arts school that we work with, they have implemented some shareholder engagement strategies around proxy voting and co-filing, and are doing some really interesting work in that area. So next slide, please. So my hope in sharing these case studies and data points is that you each get a sense of the direction the investment space is heading in, how institutions and individuals are starting to see how the capital they control can be utilized to transition to a more just society, and how that work is manifesting across various endowment types. And there are several institutions like Arizona State and University of New Hampshire that are leading endowments in this space, and plenty of ways for all endowments to connect with others that are further along in the process to move this work forward. So one last thing before I hand it off to our other panelists. We can go to the next slide. I just want to quickly circle back to the other capital pool I mentioned that IEN works with, student managed investment funds. So in my opinion, this is a really exciting aspect of our work at IEN, to not only look to shift the capital that endowments invest, but also look at how, when endowments model sustainable investing, how, when coupling that with coursework, endowments can be a vehicle for educating and engaging and empowering students. So the program at IEN that focuses on this area of work is called SILK, which stands for Sustainable and Impact Investing, Learning and Knowledge, SIILK. And through SILK, we look to skill the uptake of sustainable investing education, including courses and experiential education opportunities like student managed funds. We support student funds as they look to build stronger bridges between their student fund and their university endowment. And we also look to increase the diversity and number of students entering the sustainable investing field. So these are conversations that each of our panelists, especially Karan, are actively engaged in, and it's a huge opportunity to leverage the social purpose of higher education institutions to be role models for society, not only by shifting the economy, but also fueling the entire investment ecosystem and developing the next generation of sustainable investing leaders. I believe US higher ed institutions educate around 20 million students a year. So great opportunity to model positive behavior in this way there. So with that, I'm excited to hear from Fiona and Jeff and Karan to share how their institutions are approaching these conversations and circle back in a bit with more resources and some action planning.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole. And I think that really is a wonderful segue into why we collectively thought this would be a great session for Ashoka U. I think I've been coming to the Ashoka U Exchange almost every year for the last 10 years. And I'm very passionate about how do we engage students in sustainability. So what you're going to hear from today is myself from the UNH story, another case study from Arizona State University with Jeff Mindlin, and then also from Karan, who is from Northeastern University and is a student there. So hopefully over these 3 different case studies, you will hear some different models for how universities are choosing to really engage as students, undergraduates and MBAs, but mostly undergraduates, in the work of transitioning our universities' endowments to more sustainably managed funds. As Nicole shared with the data, this is a huge opportunity, $650 billion opportunity to really leverage our universities' endowments, but also to really engage students in high impact learning and really modeling the way. We fundamentally know that students of this generation care deeply about working for, buying from, and investing in companies that align with their values. And while I think a lot of students are very aware of sustainable consumption and purchasing, sustainable supply chains, for many students, the role that the investment markets play in advancing a sustainable future is still pretty invisible. And this is a wonderful way, by engaging students with the university endowment and how it's invested, to really allow students to learn the power of the investment field in our sustainable future, and to also give them some really great skills along the way. So just a little bit about the University of New Hampshire. We're located on the east coast of the United States. We're the state's flagship public research university, founded over 150 years ago. We are a historic land grant university, but also more recently a sea and space grant institution. And all that really means is that the public good is deeply woven into the DNA of our mission as a university. We're about 15,000 students, have about 5,000 faculty and staff, and we have an endowment here at the UNH Durham of about $300 million. Obviously, we're all here because we care fundamentally about the Sustainable Development Goals. As a university, we're really proud to be one of only 9 institutions in the United States that are platinum on STARS, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, along with my wonderful colleague Jeff Mindlin at ASU, who you'll hear from in a minute. And so we think about sustainability in all that we do across, of course, our campus operations and how we power the buses, how we turn the lights on, dining in our dining halls. But we really started to think a number of years ago about how do we also think about how we invest our endowment, and to make sure that our endowment is really aligned with our leadership in sustainability. So I want to share our case study about how we've engaged students in this. We are bluntly a little bit further behind than where Arizona State University is. We're sort of aspiring to move down this continuum, but I thought it would be helpful to share kind of how we started in this journey for those of you that are sort of more at the beginning of this journey. So we knew that we wanted to realign UNH's endowment with our sustainability values and leadership. But bluntly, we had a hard time making the case for that early on. leadership, boards of trustees, who of course are the decision makers when it comes to our endowment. We needed to bring them along in this journey. And so we decided that in supporting students who we knew had passion around this topic, there was actually, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, there was a group of students about 6 or 7 years ago that was really pushing for divestment. And we knew that that was going to be a very tough journey at a place like UNH. And so while also supporting the divest student movement, we also engaged a group of students, one of whom you can see up here in the upper right, Austin Perea. And we engaged them. They were all part of a student organization called Net Impact. And we worked with them. They had all done summer internships through the Sustainability Institute. The previous summer, they'd all worked for various sustainable investing companies. And so had come back with a lot of knowledge, a lot of energy around the role that the investment field can play in a sustainable future. And so we said, all right, let's capture that enthusiasm. Let's support them, pair them up with faculty mentors and also industry mentors. And between them, they did a year-long research project looking at student movements and institutional change. We looked at Hampshire College, who was one of the first universities to divest. We looked at the emergence and the current state of sustainable investment as a field, recognizing this was about 7 or 8 years ago, so much earlier then. And then we turned that into recommendations for sustainable investing at the University of New Hampshire's Endowment. All of this research was presented at the undergraduate research conference to a big audience of people. And then from that, they were also invited to go and make a presentation to the foundation's board of directors. So that was really the precursor 7 or 8 years ago. And that work by students was pivotal in getting the UNH Foundation to agree to the establishment of what we call an ESG pool. So we were able to allow donors who were giving money into the endowment to select that they wanted their funds to go into the sustainably managed pool within the endowment. That was the first thing that happened. The next thing that happened was we formally created a committee on investor responsibility. For those of you that are STARS rated institutions, there are credits within STARS for establishing a committee on investor responsibility. I would say perhaps the impetus perhaps was aligned with STARS, but the value that this committee has created over the last 3.5, 4 years has been tremendous in our ability to move UNH's sustainable investing forward. So committees on investor responsibility, certainly ours, is made up of faculty from across the university, and they're not just finance faculty. We have faculty from liberal arts, and a climate scientist, staff, particularly staff from the UNH Foundation and the Sustainability Institute, but also really importantly, students, current students, alums, and members of the business community. And so the role of the committee is to really be an advisor to the UNH Foundation, particularly to the Investment and Finance Committee. So while we don't have governance authority, we play an important role in advising the Investment and Finance Committee on sustainable investing and how we can continue to align UNH's values with our endowment investing. I wanted just to share this quote from Sarah Wilkinson, who is she's an undergrad in analytical economics and sustainability, and minor in math. She is one of our 3 current students who serves on the Committee on Investor Responsibility. There's a quote here that really has talked about the role that being part of this group has played in her academic experience. I will say that last summer she interned through one of our sustainability fellowship program with a local sustainable investment management firm. So she's really now allowing herself to sort of build a set of experiences, and she's planning now to go into the ESG field when she graduates a year from now. But the students are playing an important role. Their voice is very important in the committee, but I think it's also giving back to her an incredible experience, not only to network with industry professionals and faculty and alums, but to really build her depth of understanding in sustainable investing. Just to give you a sense of the timeline at UNH, the point I'm trying to really make here is that this has been a slow burn for us, going all the way back to 2013 and even before that. I'm happy to say that in 2019, the Investment and Finance Committee of the Foundation, on the recommendation of the Committee on Investor Responsibility, agreed to transfer what at the time was about 16% of our assets under management. And today we are close to 30%, probably will be about 35% of our total endowment will be in ESG qualified investments by June 30th. We also have a sustainable retirement funds for our faculty and staff. And one of the changes that was made relatively recently was that all new endowed gifts now default into our ESG fund. Donors always have a choice and can always share their preferences, but by default, any new endowed gifts to the university are now going automatically into this ESG pool. So I will just pause there. Certainly happy to chat with anybody about our experience. And I'm now going to hand over to Jeff Mindlin, who's going to share with you a little bit more about what ASU is doing. I'm
awesome.
Sharing, Jeff, so I know you're not using slides.
Oh, good. And I can see all of you guys too.
Right.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so we're at a different spot in our journey, but I think what's important, and this is probably a key theme you heard from Fiona too, is that getting your endowment or your investment aligned with the mission of the university is a journey, and it's not just a destination. And sometimes I feel like sometimes we hit a wall on efforts that we want to do and we want to move faster. But when I look back, I've been with ASU for about 4 years, and when I look back and think about all the things that we actually have done, it like I said, it sometimes it's slow, but these are perpetual organizations that'll be around forever and outlive all of us and all of you. And so, even a small step can have a big impact, and that's sometimes important to keep in mind. So we really started off with a lot of the same efforts that Fiona spoke about, with an ESG subcommittee that had student representation, similar to her CIR. I think overall we've been fortunate that we've been in a position where we can be really thoughtful and deliberate rather than reactive to whatever the topic du jour is. And this is, I think, largely because at least at my institution and similar to UNH, there's really a sense that sustainability is inherent to our culture. Arizona State had the first school of sustainability. Our university president, this is something that you heard earlier, I think a theme from Nicole. Our president, Michael Crow, says that higher ed only makes up 5% of the carbon footprint, but we make up 100% of the learner imprint. And so this idea that we want students to be empowered, we want them to have experiential learning opportunities, where they can go on to be the future leaders that fix the problem that we're all in right now is really core to what we do. So I really was going to focus today on our student managed fund program in particular, and then we can talk about some of our other efforts as well, maybe at the end. But we had a traditional student managed fund program for about 10 years, where one of our faculty that had more of a quantitative background, financial engineering, would work with groups of students to develop an investment strategy. And around the time I joined, we started talking about expanding and adding an ESG version of that program. And then I think some of the things that we had to deal with, you'll hear from Karan in a little bit, we started having to reconcile. So if we were going to do this, did we want to set it up as a class or a club? Where was the money going to come from? How are we going to do governance on this money? And so ultimately, we really tried to match the structure of our existing SIM funds, so there wasn't a big difference. And in that, what happened was the money came from an allocation of the endowment. So we think of our student managed funds as managers, like anybody else, and any other of our managers. So they've got an allocation of our global equity bucket, a big dollar amount, but a relatively small percentage. So the money is part of the endowment, and the performance of those then has a small weighted average influence on our overall performance of what we report our endowment to be at. And then we structured it as a class. We tend to find more engagement and accountability if students are getting a grade for it. So we've always done it as a class. And they've been set up as a 2-semester course. So you're still getting 3 credits in our world. So basically, one class worth of credits, even though it's spread over 2 semesters. So it's essentially 2 credits 1 semester, and then one credit in the next semester. And then with our ESG sim fund, environmental social governance, we set it up specifically to have more of an interdisciplinary tilt. So we ended up with both business and sustainability students. We ended up with both graduate and undergraduate students, all in the same course, all having to work together. I think what I found was really interesting is that the educational process with the students ended up mirroring a lot of what we did with our investment committee. So, going in, I think a lot of students, similar to our committee members, tend to think of ESG or sustainable investing as one of 2 things. Either it's all about divestment or it's all about impact. And it's either or, and there's nothing in between. So that was part of the education process, right? I was thinking about what did we want this to mean to us? And then it was an interesting journey because we had this interdisciplinary group. We had to basically teach finance and investing to the sustainability students and teach sustainability to the business students and get everyone on the same page. And then after we had that foundational work done, it was really a blank slate of starting to think about, what are our objectives of the course? And I think, again, interestingly, versus the more traditional student managed funds, the students really build a philosophy of being a change maker. They really see their involvement in the fund and having a bigger impact and a longer lasting impact than just, hey, we want to make money for the next 6 months. So typically the journey starts off by looking at a slate of existing ETFs and mutual funds to get a sense of what's out there from an existing strategy perspective. And students then build what we call a placeholder fund portfolio strategy while they develop an individual stock selection methodology. So we start off by really looking at everything that's out there and then picking a couple of funds or ETFs as a starting point, and then the portfolio is invested. And then that gives some time to build the individual stock selection strategy. And then we ultimately start transitioning into individual stocks. And that typically is the first semester. And then over the second semester, what the students will do is work on managing the portfolio. They'll work on refining the methodology of picking the stocks, and then start thinking about shareholder engagement. Do they want to talk to any of the companies that we've invested in and about their practices and change? And then one of the unique things that we do, and this is again similar to something you heard from Fiona, was that our students get to present to our investment committee. So this club or this fund has been a unique opportunity to get ESG or sustainable investing at the forefront. So during a working lunch once a year, we'll have these students come and speak to our investment committee about their efforts. And again, it becomes another opportunity to really educate our committee on what is meant by sustainable investing. And I think, again, all too often there's maybe an image of students protesting or chaining themselves to our door, asking us to divest from fossil fuels. But it's really impactful to have very well educated and articulate students come in and talk about a very balanced approach and trying to think about doing good and doing well, thinking about understanding our fiduciary responsibility, but also the opportunity to be a transformational catalyst in how we invest our money. And so that's been a really I think important element of dripping on our committee to start changing the tide a little bit of how they think about this process. And then ultimately we wrap up by thinking about what do these students want to impart in the next year's crop. So what is the message? What is the impact that they wanted to have? And what do they want the next group to kind of take forward and learn from what they've done? And so it is a kind of a fluid process, but we've had again, I think a lot of success in bringing together students with different backgrounds, giving them the opportunity to manage money, having them understand what is meant by sustainable investing, thinking about how an endowment is structured and what its objectives are, and then actually getting to be part of that investment committee process, which has been really good. So with that, I'll pause and maybe let Karan speak about his experience getting a fund off the ground, and then obviously we'll have time at the end to answer specific questions.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And I am glad to see you and Karan coordinated on shirts. You know, it's obviously the check shirt.
I do, and I have mine is an ASU, so I'm.
Oh, there you go. Branded merch. All right. I am going to see if I can share screen again for Karan for his slides. Let's see. All right, Karan, just start speaking. For some reason, I'm having a trouble getting it back to that, but keep speaking and I will have those up for you momentarily.
For sure. Thank you, Fiona, and pleasure to be here. So I see that there are a couple students on the chat. I see Diego and Sky. So my presentation might be more catered towards the students out here. And if you have any questions, I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat so far. Please do ask away, and I'll try to address as we speak and I talk about this. So NU Impact is Northeastern University's impact investing initiative. And how it's different compared to what we heard from Fiona and Jeff is that we are completely undergrad led. So our students source investments, our students prospect investments, and the investment committee as well is made up of majority students. So 3:2 student vote counts for one investment. Also, we invest in private markets, so we don't invest in public companies. And the reason we do that is because we felt that we could see impact at a highest level when we invest in our own community, and that's why we've taken a Boston-centric approach when making these investments. So we can go to the next slide. So real quick, this is our agenda for today. I'll talk about our mission, our investment process, and I'll give you a few case study examples of what's in our portfolio. And towards the end, I'll also highlight how you can start a fund like this at your university if you're passionate about impact investing and sustainability. So a few fast facts about NU Impact. We're one of the first undergrad-led funds in America. So far, we have $25,000 invested in the Boston community. It's actually just becoming 50 grand while we are speaking. So I'm not sure when the bank transfer actually takes place, but it's taking place as I'm speaking right now, hopefully. We have 50 student members on our team, so a pretty large team. And very consciously, we've tried to recruit members from all colleges at Northeastern. So not just the business school, but the College of Engineering, the College of Health Science, College of Professional Studies, etc. And one fun fact about NU Impact compared to most other funds or business clubs on campus is we are majority women-led, and our founding team was also women. So we are very passionate about making sure that we are a diverse group of people because with diversity comes a lot of thoughts which are interesting and we grow together. We host a lot of programming as well. And last year, we hosted 17 events and an annual conference which had 150 plus attendees and 13 universities. We can go to the next slide. So our mission is two-pronged, right? The first part is educational programming. So we hope to educate students about what impact investing is. We do that through speaker events, panels, workshops, our annual conference, and the likes of that. Our second wing is the more experiential learning part of things, where we actually allow students to be a part of our impact fund. We have a few workshops about how to become impact investors while you're a student, and then they sort of go about prospecting companies, having conversations with founders, and eventually making a pitch. We can go the next slide. Cool, Emily. I see your question, and I'll definitely be addressing that in my last slide. So this is a brief overview of what our educational team looks like. You can see that there's lots of color, there is lots of diversity, and just want a quick picture of that. We can go next slide. This is what our fund team looks like. So a pretty large team. Quick note out here is that the team is divided up into 5 different sectors. Healthcare, community and impact, energy and environment are a few, along with 2 others. We can go next slide. So this might be more interesting. I'm sorry, the formatting seems to have got spoiled for some reason. I promise you the formatting is good on the actual slide deck. But this is what our investment process looks like. So for those of you who might be familiar with what a VC fund looks like, a VC typically sees maybe 1,000 companies in an average cycle or an average term, and they choose to invest in 10 of those. So a pretty robust pipeline which moves towards the end, and you can see the triangle out here as well. We start out with an initial prospecting and sourcing. This is our team scouring the website, scouring Google, talking to people and finding companies that fit our investment thesis. We then set up calls with the companies. I remember when I had my first call with this founder in the impact space, how much I learned from him, how many questions he asked, and how much I still had to learn in time to go. if this first conversation seems to fit an investment thesis, we do a deeper dive and present a one page to our team. And if that's still a good fit, then we sort of do a very deep diligence and present an investment review memorandum, which is like a 30-page document about everything about the company to our investment committee, which then takes a vote whether they want to invest money or not. And once we invest the money, we sort of take part in a 3-year educational consulting contract wherein we help that company with certain things related to their impact metrics and all that good stuff. We can go next slide. This is a quick look at our investment thesis. So we have a 3-pronged investment thesis. The first prong is that we only invest in companies that are Boston based because we see us making an impact very close to home where Northeastern is located. The second prong is that these companies do not have to be profitable or making money at the time of our investment. However, in the long run, we should see our money coming back. Typical investment would be for a 5 to 7 year lockup period. So in 5 to 7 years, we hope to see our principal amount coming back with a small premium, which we hope to seek as impact investors. Lastly is we hope to address founders from underserved communities, so people who might not have access to capital like you and I might have, or people who are addressing problems in the underserved community. Next slide, please. This is again a quick look at how our investment meetings actually take place. You can see a team out there on the right presenting what seems to be the investment review memorandum, so somewhere on the third stage. And this is where an actual vote would take place as to which investment you want to go for. And then students would work with our faculty members to actually write the term sheets as well. And it's a great learning process when you're so young. We can go next slide. I promise you I'm nearing towards the end. So this is a quick look at 2 of our case studies. The first one is Eat-Well. So Eat-Well was our first investment sourced by the Food and Agriculture team in fall 2019. Eat-Well provides low-cost, nutritious meal kits in food desert areas. So think about they provide a pot-style meals which can cook in 30 minutes, 5 meals for $10. So pretty economical and pretty nutritious. Our second investment was in TrillFit. TrillFit is the first Black woman-owned gym in Boston and one of the only ones in America. They seek to improve the health disparity in the colored community and get more women in the field of fitness as well. You'll see really quick that our investments in both these companies were very different. The first investment was a safe note, which is very common in early stage investing. And the second investment was a straight up loan, which was a debt like investment. We do this consciously so that students get to play around with different investment vehicles. We are pretty flexible and they can learn how these are deployed when being early stage impact investors. We can go next slide. This is a quick look at our advisory group. So this is a very grounds up initiative. And initially when we reached out to Northeastern saying can we get some money from the endowment to do what we want to do, the impact investing fund, we said this is not possible because investing privately is much more riskier than investing publicly, because what if a company fails? Northeastern doesn't want to own their truck or their shop, right? Because we are not a for-profit university, we are a non-profit university. And that's when they said, you have to build out a few things before we can trust you and sign off that, we can have an impact investing fund at Northeastern. One part of that was finding champions in different spaces. So for example, we found a robust faculty advisory group where Mark Bernfeld, the person on the top left, is actually an angel investor with 40 companies in his personal portfolio. And he advises us on the term sheet writing process. From the industry advisor side, we found Carl Wallenstein, who's a partner at a big law firm in Boston. And he makes sure that from a legal standpoint, we're all set and nobody can ask questions to students that we might not have answers to. We also build a pretty robust alumni community to make sure that students graduate, but the fund still lives on. And we want to make sure that we have a strong set of values. And we actually have 16 values laid out on paper that we adhere to as a fund and every member signs off on every semester. We can go next slide. That's it. I'll quickly answer a few questions that were on the chat. The first one is, I guess there's only one real question about safe notes. Yes, they have it's more founder friendly when compared to a convertible note. What we did was we used the Y Combinator safe note template that's on their website. It's free of cost. to build our safe note out, we made a few modifications to match our investment, but using their template was super easy to actually write the terms. Cool.
Great. Thanks so much, Karan. I can't believe you're an undergrad. You are poised for an amazing future. I hope you get lots of amazing job offers based on this work you've been doing in the Student Managed Fund. So we would love to open it up for questions from the audience. I think the only way that the audience can do that is through the chat function. I think that's right, Nicole? Doesn't seem like we can have people ask us questions live, unfortunately. But we'd love to hear questions if you have any. I would perhaps, so there's a question here that's really about, I'd love to do this in my own college, but how can I start? So why don't we turn it over to Nicole and Karan, Jeff, share a little bit about sort of your best advice about how to get started. This sounds, amazing, but also can be overwhelming and hard to know how to get traction. So what advice would you have about how best to get started, apart from joining the Silk network as part of IEN, which is going to be a fantastic resource? I think we've all found that to be an amazing resource in this work. Who'd like to go first?
I can maybe go first on that.
Great.
And my main piece of advice would be to join the Silk network. And I just quickly, the way that Silk and IEN work is as a resource hub and a way to connect with others that are doing this work. So by connecting with Silk, and I'll drop a link in the chat here for a website where you can learn more. Karan is involved in Silk, Jeff is involved in Silk, and it's a great resource of students that and faculty and staff that are involved in these student managed investment funds. We have a few really relevant resources I can quickly highlight. One is a toolkit for how to start a student managed investment fund that students wrote a few years ago, outlining the steps that they took to start their fund, and key things you should know and stakeholders you should connect with to do that work. A second resource is a database we have of the different student funds that are involved in Silk and where they got their funding, what their size is, if they're managed through a class or a club or externally, how many students are involved, what sustainable investing strategies they utilize, all of that information. And the third is a resource that will be coming out next week, which is a kind of state of the field report about student managed investment funds and how many out of the 600 or so traditionally managed funds are utilizing sustainable investing strategies and what that looks like with some more detailed case studies, including a case study on Karan's work at Northeastern. So at that silknetwork.org link, all of those resources are available. And I'm sure Jeff and Karan have some more actionable first steps as well.
Nicole, and if people are interested in getting that state of the field report, if they drop their email in the chat, you would, I'm sure, be willing to email them that report.
Absolutely.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and from our side, and you heard about a little bit from what Nicole mentioned, and then Karan. I think the sourcing of the funds is an important first step, right? So kind of understanding where's the money going to come from. I think having a proponent is really key. And again, there's different ways of getting people interested or excited about this. I mean, certainly, Fiona's counterpart at your university that's in the sustainability office. There's lots of elements there. I mean, she made a mention of their CIR and how that helped with their Asia Stars survey. And I think, right or wrong, I think we're in a similar boat where, surveys really do help guide behavior. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's starting to set off the steps that a university needs to do on what's recognized as best practices. And so to the extent that some of these things might maybe check those boxes or appeal to people because they could get more points on a survey, it's a good inroads. That's partially how our ESG subcommittee started. It's partially how student involvement there happened. It's partially how we got $100 million set aside for a dedicated sustainability pool. So all these things are steps that help progress, and again, there's a motivation in there. So I think finding a proponent on the administration side or the foundation side, and then also on the faculty side is important. Again, depending on whether it's going to be a faculty that teaches or is more of a sponsor of a club, I think having that is important. In our world, we structure ours, I guess in the real world, governance-wise is important. Regardless of where the money's coming from, it's most likely going to be theoretically, the foundation's money, whether it's new gifts that come in to support it or whether it's an allocation from the endowment. So it's important to understand that there is a fiduciary responsibility for that. And so in our case, students actually don't technically have the discretion to trade. They're advising my team. So we've got the discretion, and that's part of how our committee's gotten comfortable with the governance. Now in practice, we don't second guess their investment decision. It's really just making sure that they're able to follow the policy, and they're not going to put 100% of their money in Tesla like that. We wouldn't be good. So we're navigating those things, but ultimately that's part of the process that gets people comfortable with it is understanding, okay, there's going to be literally somebody in control of it that's not just turning over the trading to the students or things like that. Although we've actually added in trading authorization for students. They actually enter the trades and then we approve them. So they're still getting that experience of the trade entering as well. So yeah, I think, finding places where you have inroads and then figuring out the logistics of the money. And if you don't have a strategy on the money, again, I think, somebody on the foundation side whose job it is to raise money, this is a really exciting topic, and it's, maybe low-hanging fruit that they could go help and raise money for. So, finding some advocates and proponents is where I'd start.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead, Karan. Yeah.
No, I thought those are some great pieces of advice. How we started was, I'll lay out a quick 6-step process, how you can start a student fund on your campus. The first one would be maybe start by organizing some education programming to see if there's interest in impact fund, in impact investing on your campus, and you can also educate yourself and students about that. The second step would be, once that interest is generated, let faculty or your dean know that there's interest in this initiative, and so they'll push it forward as well. The third step would be to build out a prospectus for your fund, which you can use while fundraising with other entities. So whenever we meet any donors, we pitch our prospectus, parts of it which you saw right now. The fourth step would be build out some operating rules for your fund. So there is a legal procedure as to how you'll operate. Every school has a lawyer which they're willing to give free of service, who will help you draft this. It's not easy to get in touch with, but once you get in touch with them, they're pretty helpful. The fifth step would be definitely join Silk. I can't tell you how big a help it's been to our fund, because we connected with so many other funds at Dartmouth, Tuck, Duke, etc., who were in a similar place as us. And we exchanged best practices, had calls even after Silk, and became friends, which is super cool. And then last thing would be, I saw, I think Emily talk about tax and investments. Don't worry too much about that. There are professors and university officials who handle all that stuff, because it's not important. Just show that you're passionate and keep banging on the door, because initially you might hear that people are not agreeing to do this because it's unheard of or it's less common. But if you bang on the door long enough, it will open up, and plenty more as well. So we found it really hard to build impact investing initially. We were actually sourcing companies without a fund. We just told people that we are trying to get funds, but will you act as our pilot model? And once we got a good company, we told our dean that we found the company now, and we spent 4 months doing this. So please give us the money to invest. And he gave us the first ticket size, $25,000. And now we have 150 grand in our fund and hope to make more investments. So find that initial champion, I guess.
That's great advice, Karan. There's a question in the chat from Michelle King about the degree to which this is aligned or integrated into the curriculum. So Jeff, do you want to just speak a little bit about how that works at ASU?
Mm-hmm. So this is a tricky part for us. Again, we set it up as a class, but it actually was one of the harder questions, is where do we stick it? Because in our traditional student managed funds, it's a 400 level finance course for finance majors, and so there's a rigor of investing expertise that's expected, because there's a lot of prerequisites and there's a level there. So we were concerned, or the deans and department chairs were concerned about creating this course where we wanted to allow sustainability students and people that didn't have as strong of an investment background in being at the same stage and being comparable. So what we found was easier was to get it set up in the sustainability side, and then It works as a practicum for sustainability. So it's a same thing. It's a 400 level class. If you're a sustainability major, it's one of the classes that you could take to fulfill your major requirement. But even for the business majors, they have upper division elective requirements as well. So it still fit within that framework. But that was a big conversation, is kind of where to put it based on what our topics were going to be. And again, it's where the provost and other deans have much more of a focus on the academia side. So I led the class for 2 years, and then right now it's operating as a club, and we want to create it back into a class for next semester. And again, that's partially what's the trickiest part. And I think to Karan's point, I wish I had talked to him when we started. We had a little bit of a if you build it, they will come approach. Our committee actually was started some of the ideas. And so the first year we didn't have a ton of students involved because it just was a new class and there wasn't a lot of marketing about it. So it took some time to get that momentum going to get more interest, which is helpful.
Jeff, do you allow students to take it twice? Can students in theory kind of take it over multiple semesters or years even?
So usually most people take it the fall and then spring, so kind of back to back. We had a couple of students actually do it the opposite and do spring and then fall. And that actually provided a really nice continuity because then you had some subject matter expertise that carried over from the previous cohort. And so, I actually really liked that structure. They still ended up with their 3 credits total, but it was kind of the opposite as everybody else. So they can. And in our other one, in our traditional one, students can. It's usually geared for seniors, but or MBAs. But oftentimes, super high achieving juniors will take it, and then they'll become leaders in the next year. And I don't think they get credit again. I think they're kind of doing it more as on a volunteer basis. But some people do take it twice.
Yeah, I think that's really. We are aspiring to have a student led fund within the endowment based on Jeff's model. We have a program right now called the B Impact Clinic where teams of students are helping local companies get B Corp certified. And we have that model where we intentionally allow students to take it multiple semesters. We're lucky that we have at the business school here, we have something called Business in Practice where students have to take 4 2-credit experiences that really are about applying business theory to practice. And so they can take it through that multiple times. And we found that there's a lot of complexity to this, right? And so we actually, students who are doing it for the second or third time step up and act as peer mentors and team leads. And we found that expertise and that leadership is really important in terms of the quality of the experience for everybody. Yeah. Karan, talk a little bit about Northeastern and sort of how this fits with the curriculum or not.
Yeah, for sure. So NU Impact was born from the impact investing class started at Northeastern previously. So 5 years ago, 2 students were taking an impact investing class started by Professor Sarah Menard. And one of the projects in the class was to come up with an idea for an impact investing fund that was different compared to what already existed. And students came up with the idea of NU Impact, and that's how the program was born. Unfortunately, Sarah had to leave Northeastern, and for 2 years, there was a gap, but students continued to fill that gap with programming. And 3 years ago, we started having an impact investing class again. However, we do not use that class to like as a formal requirement of any sort. Students come from all fields. However, they take the class, that there is advantages. And we have a analyst tiered model. So we start off with rotational associates who are underclassmen, junior analysts who have some experience in VC, venture capital, etc., and then senior analysts who have done a co-op in the impact investing firm or an internship in the same, and can really help students out with this process. So nothing too formal with the class structure. We have gone more with the experiential learning model, I guess.
That's great. Thank you. If there are any other questions, we'd love to encourage you to put them in. I just have one last question. I think, Jeff, for you, really. Can you talk a little bit about the value that you see to having the student-managed ESG fund within ASU's endowment as opposed to separate? I mean, I'm sure there are some pluses and minuses of that, but maybe talk about both.
Sure. I mean, one of the questions, and I think, and I'll get to yours, that I wanted to at least touch on too, is about taxes, and I think Karan touched on it a little bit, but for everybody on the same page, right? So most universities, foundations, endowments are nonprofits, so the taxes are irrelevant. It is one of the things that typically comes up during our trading strategies with our students, especially when they're presenting it, is if you weren't doing this for a foundation or endowment, would you have done the same strategy? Because taxes for the rest of the world do matter. So it's not something that we tend to think a lot about, but it is, I think, good to understand what that means. To your question, Fiona, I think what makes sense of it or what I like about it being as part of the endowment. Some of it is the synergies I talked about before, is being able to talk to our committee about the sustainable investment strategies that are implemented. Our first year really thought of their mandate as trying out all of the entire menu of sustainable investment strategies over the course of the 2 semesters. So they did, some divestment things, and they did some ESG integration, and they did some impact investing, and they did some shareholder engagement, and they really wanted to try everything in the menu, and in some form or fashion, which was really neat. So I think there's that element which is helpful. I think the other thing that's nice about it being in the endowment is again on the synergy side is as we were thinking about how they interact with other pieces, it works well. So we're actually talking about having our ESG SIM fund also voting proxies for the traditional SIM funds, and kind of using them as a resource for our other ones. And again, that works out a little bit easier when they're all in the same, they're kind of all managing money for the same beneficial owner in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree. That's the path that we're going down. At UNH, we talk a lot about the sustainable learning community, so that, we are where everything we do teaches, and everything, everyone is a learner. And I think by having students, in a very small way, manage a part of the endowment and really help that transition to sustainable investing, I think is just a really powerful model. It matters, right? I mean, it's part of our endowment, and the results matter, and people are paying attention. And
the other thing, Fiona, that I think for our non-students that are on here, that I think resonates is one of the stories or the messages that we try to tell is the impact the endowment has beyond who the donor has earmarked for the payout. So right, how an endowment, and Nicole talked about this a little bit, right? But money gets pulled together, and then each donor. So when we think about endowment, we think of like big E and little e, right? So there's 2,000 or 3,000 endowment accounts, individual donations that have been made, that we pull together into our capital E endowment. So there's obviously the benefit of my endowment is paying out to this scholarship or this professorship, but the other impact that we like to talk to donors about is all the things that the endowment allows us to do, whether that be move forward on sustainable investing efforts alongside the university, or these experiential student learning things. And so having the student managed fund program be part of the endowment is another way of talking about supporting that next generation of leaders through the endowment that maybe aren't getting any payout from your gift, but they're still benefiting on the basis of it being in there. So that's another reason why we like it being part of the endowment too. It helps that impact story.
Thank you. So we just have a few minutes left. Nicole, you were going to lead a little action planning here. Are you still ready to do some action planning?
I would love to do some action planning. I think a good segue here in these 2 kind of separate conversation streams that are very interrelated, in that roadmap that I mentioned, and Fiona, maybe if you could pull up that visual of the roadmap, that would be helpful. We have these different steps that we see endowments going through, where they're learning about various sustainable investing strategies. They're looking to build consensus on campus, then turning that consensus into language for their investment policy, and then implementing that language in their investment portfolio, assessing the portfolio, continuing to realign and communicate their progress, and then revisit those steps over and over and over again as new information comes up and they look to pursue new investment strategies. And in that kind of learning and consensus building process, we've seen a lot of schools find an immense value in creating and working with student-managed investment funds to get that multi-stakeholder approach, similarly to a committee on investor responsibility, where you're hearing from different stakeholders on campus and bringing their viewpoints into the investment decision-making, and kind of having a place to test out some of these strategies before implementing them more broadly. So something that we all talked about in our last 10 or so minutes here were to have you all identify where you are on this roadmap. And you could either take this as related to an endowment or related to starting a student fund. I think it really works for both. And then maybe take 1 or 2 minutes in thinking about these case studies that have been shared and some of these resources, what a really concrete next step might be for you to take in the coming weeks to advance these conversations at your institution. And that could be anything like, I need to connect with Karan, or I need to read more about what other schools are doing. It doesn't need to be anything crazy, but I think we would love it if you could all take a minute to think about what a good next step could be, including resources you may need or people you may need to talk to. And then would love if you could share some of those thoughts out. And Fiona, Karan, Jeff, feel free to add anything to that.
We're just going to give people about a minute to do that, Nicole, and I'll leave this slide up for now. And then people should put their thoughts in the chat. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Great. A few more seconds and then we'll come back together. So I have to tell you, having been to probably 9 or 10 exchanges over the last few years, they're always the highlight of my year. I get so much valuable learning and connections when I go to an Ashoka U exchange. But I have to say, one of the things I really learned is I get so many ideas. I get so inspired. I have lots of notes. And then, of course, you get back to the office the following week and what happens to all those great ideas. And so it's one of the reasons why we wanted to just do a little action planning with people, just to sort of have you think about some of the things, the concrete next steps that you want to take as a result of some of the things that you've hopefully been inspired by today. So great, we've got some things in here. Sky, first of all, she wants to find out how her university is investing. Absolutely, Sky. I think, as we said at the beginning, there's just not a lot of, it's not on people's radar screens, right? Unless you are perhaps a student in the business school or studying finance. It's just not on a lot of students' radars. There has been a lot of talk in the past about divestment, but not about on the other side, which is it's not about what you're not investing in, but what are you actually investing in? And so just trying to find out more about what your university is doing. Certainly universities like the 3 that you've heard from, we're talking more about that, but a lot of universities are not yet. So it's a great way for students to really use the power of your voice, ask your university to be transparent about that. And then talk about this subject with my Ashoka U group. Yep, fantastic idea.
And I would just real quick on how the university is investing. I know we're almost at time. I think and I'm speaking for myself, right? I mean, it's one of the parts of my job that I enjoy. Like, I love interacting with students, and but I think sometimes the key is to kind of keep it from being confrontational, adversarial, right? I mean, I think we all are, those of us that work at a university or folks like Nicole that work at a nonprofit, are doing it because it's their passion, right? And so we're dedicated to the mission of the university as well. We're not bad people. So, I think there's sometimes this idea of like, we're all bad capitalists and whatever. But I think if when students come in with kind of a motivation to learn more and understand what we're doing and open to change and learning things, I think those are really enjoyable conversations on both sides. But most investment offices would be totally willing to talk to a student about investment strategy and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. And, there has been, I think, with a lot of the divestment campaigns, there has been some contentious, situations, and I don't want to minimize that. But I think we have certainly found that the focus on what are we investing in and how do we use, the entire corpus of our endowment potentially to be aligned with our commitments to sustainability. That is a path forward that, A, we believe is really powerful, and B, is something that really can bring different stakeholders together around this topic. It's a really nice bridge building sort of mechanism. So I think we are just about out of time. Any last advice, Nicole, Karan, Jeff, you'd like to share with folks on the folks live with us or maybe watching the recording later? Any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I put my email address in the chat again. Happy to help. With students or with faculty on these topics and kind of let them know what we've done in more detail or specific questions. I really enjoyed getting to work with Karan over the last couple of years. And obviously very humbling to see students like him out there and proud of what he's done.
Absolutely. Karan?
Yeah, I guess thank you, Jeff, for the kind words. But my only advice would be, if you never ask, the answer is always no. So go out there, ask. Even if you hear no, somebody else will tell you yes. So keep asking, and eventually, things happen. Like that's what we've seen at Northeastern. It took us 3 years to start our fund, but we finally got there. So I'm sure you will too.
Absolutely. Nicole?
I don't know how much more I have to add, honestly. I think identifying key stakeholders and champions is a huge, incredibly important step that I know both Jeff and Karan have already pointed to. But having someone, especially if you're a student, that has that continuity at the institution that can champion these concepts and support you in moving them forward, or being that person for students presently or in the future that may want to be involved in these conversations, is more than necessary.
I also, really quick, I think times have changed, right? I mean, I think about where we are today versus where we were, 12 months ago, which was kind of the anniversary of COVID, or 2 years ago. So these things are much more in the mainstream. So even if the answer was no a year ago or 2 years ago, I think you'd be surprised, to Karan's point, if you ask again, it's much more on the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the ESG is moving very fast from being a niche of the investment industry to being sort of mainstream, and I think attitudes are changing, as you said, Jeff. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us. We were really excited to do this session at Ashoka U. I don't think there's been a lot of discussion at Ashoka in the past about connecting student learning with endowment practices. But as we said at the beginning, we think this is a really huge opportunity, not only because it's $650 billion of university endowments in this country that could be being invested to advance sustainability goals, but because it's also just a really powerful student learning and engagement opportunity. So we hope you've been inspired by the 3 case studies that we shared today and by the amazing resources that are available to all of us for free through the Intentional Endowments Network. So thank you, Jeff and Karan, for the amazing work you're doing at your universities. Thank you, Nicole, for the incredible work that you and George and the others at Intentional Endowments Network is leading, that really supports all of us in what we do. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the exchange.
Thank you all. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.